Surviving the Applewhites, Chapter 30. "Raves, every last one of them," Randolph said. It wasn't news any more, Jake thought. The family, including Hal, had gathered in the living room with pitchers of Govindaswami's now famous Playhouse Punch and platters of cookies to read the reviews together. Everyone had already read them and reread them, probably memorizing, as he had, the parts about them. Randolph waved the local paper. "The Gazette says Traybridge has never seen such a level of professionalism and talent from a local cast." He read the page in his hand. "Worthy of Broadway, he calls it." Well, he's probably never actually seen a Broadway production. Still, listen to this. "The board of the Traybridge Little Theater needs to ask itself why it canceled such a stellar production. If the new Wits End Playhouse chooses to mount a whole season, our local theater isn't likely to survive the competition." Take that, Miss Montrose. "You are not, of course, considering a whole season," Sybil said. "You wouldn't—" "Couldn't," Zebediah said. "There's no heat in the barn." "What about summer?" Hal asked. "We could do shows in the summer." The reviews had all mentioned the original, ingenious, beautifully painted sets, and Hal had apparently rethought his mission in life. The sign on his bedroom door now read, "Hal Applewhite, Sculptor and Set Designer." Archie shook his head. "No air conditioning either." "We could do 2 productions a year," Randolph said. "One in the fall and one in the spring. I'm considering the possibility." Sybil groaned. "I'll have to start turning out Petunia Grantham mysteries by the dozen to raise the money, then. Do you have any idea how much this production cost?" Randolph waved his hand dismissively. "You can't count the cost of renovating the barn. A few productions as successful as this one, and we're bound to make that up. Besides, you have ground to a halt on the great American novel anyway, and you know it. No point pretending Petunia Grantham is in your blood." "If we do another musical," Cordelia said, "there needs to be a lot more dancing." "No nuns." This was Lucille. "I'll never make another habit as long as I live." "You won't need to," Sybil said. "We own 20 of them now." "Listen to this," Bernstein said, holding up a printout from the internet. "It's from Charlotte. The intriguing choice to use an accordion rather than an orchestra gave the production an air of Tyrolean folk authenticity that was entirely new. The accordion's ability to mimic the sound of an organ was a bonus for the Abbey scenes." "My favorite," Lucille said, "is the one from Raleigh. 'Rainbow Cast Antidote to Third Reich's Racism' is the headline. The reviewer says, after the initial surprise of seeing an African American playing Maria, the audience lost all awareness of skin color. An important lesson for us all." "What did I tell you?" Randolph said. "That's the one that talks about the candles, isn't it?" Edie asked. Lucille nodded and read on. "The use of candles to light the last scene set the final rendition of 'Climb Every Mountain Apart' and provided a powerful metaphor. The Von Trapp family singers throughout their entire musical career lit candles rather than cursing the dark." "Good thing I had the foresight to do the candlelight procession at the top of the show," Randolph said. "It isn't in the script, you know." Edie bristled. "Don't you dare take credit for my idea. Quick thinking under pressure, that's what that was." All right, but I had the good sense to decide to keep it in." Jake was only half listening. His part was so small he hadn't expected to find himself mentioned in the reviews. But to his astonishment, he'd been in almost all of them. He'd made copies to send to his parents. "Mature performance from a promising teen in a small but pivotal role," one of them said. "Convincing both as adolescent suitor and Nazi," another reviewer wrote. "With commanding stage presence, Jake Semple turned in a performance equal to any in this impressive production. We expect to hear more from this young man with the mellifluous singing voice." Jake had looked up mellifluous, flowing with honey or sweetness. Never had anyone mention sweetness and Jake's sample in the same sentence before. He would send a copy to his social worker in Rhode Island. "Read the one about me," Destiny said. He was lying on the floor next to Winston, drawing with fluorescent markers. The youngest Von Trapp transformed from a girl named Gretel to a hat-obsessed little boy named Hans was played with uncommon gusto by Destiny Applewhite. Uncommon gusto, Sybil repeated. That's you, all right. That, Jake thought, was the whole Applewhite clan, Govindaswamy and Bernstein, too. A butterfly fluttered in and landed on Govindaswamy's shoulder. Govindaswamy raised his glass of punch, and the butterfly stepped delicately onto the edge and unrolled its tongue to drink. Polly, who had stayed on in the main house after the television crew left, raised his wings, gave a couple of small hops along his perch, and swore. "That's a new one," Zebediah said. "He learned it from Marcia Manning," Cordelia said. It was the only lasting thing the television people had left behind, Jake thought. The lightning bolt that had knocked out the power had struck their satellite dish, and they'd gathered up their roasted equipment and left the morning after the opening. The next day, Bernstein had gotten an email message from the network explaining that the producer had gone off to a spa to recuperate from a nervous exhaustion, and Miss Manning had taken a job with a competing network. Consequently, the Applewhite spot, originally planned for 12 minutes of prime time, would be cut into 2.5. It might air, they said, on a slow news day as the human interest piece at the end of the evening news. Bernstein had taken the news pretty well. "Associate producer doesn't mean much of anything anyway." He had managed to sell an article on the way television's mass market focus cheapened art to the journal that had originally given him the Sybil Jameson assignment. Now that the Sound of Music was up and running and would be over within another week, Jake thought the Applewhites would be getting back to normal, whatever that was. Jeremy was planning to stay on to work on his book about the family. Govindaswamy was going to an ashram in Idaho to lecture on cooking as meditation. Randolph had gotten a call from a theater in Pennsylvania to do a Rainbow Sound of Music as their Christmas show. Edie was already revising her curriculum plan. She was planning a project on goat husbandry to take the place of the completed butterfly project. As for Jake, the only thing he knew for certain was that somehow or another he was going to get himself on the stage again. He had an answer now to Zebediah's question about what gave him joy. He wasn't about to waste a mellifluous voice and commanding stage presence. An adventurous quest for the meaning of life involving the ability to think things through. The banner was back up in the schoolroom where the barn renovation schedule had been. Jake didn't know any more about the meaning of life than he had the first day he came to Wits End. But whatever else he could say about the way the Applewhites lived, it certainly was an adventurous quest, and he was beginning to get some idea of the value of thinking things through. Winston pointedly ignored Govindaswamy's butterfly, sighed and rolled over, his head coming to rest on Jake's foot. Jake scratched behind his ears. Destiny was humming as he drew. He looked up at Jake. "What color are you going to make your hair when the show is over?" he asked. "I don't know," Jake said. "What color do you think?" "Blonde," Destiny said, "like mine." Jake shrugged. "I think maybe brown, like mine."